How's everybody doing? My name is Ibrahim Abdul-Matin, and this is the No Spoon blog, and I'm here with one of the titans of the sports world, Mr. Dave Zirin, author of books. He's one of the people that sort of agitates for the connection of sports and politics and race and gender and class, so that we have a full understanding of where sports fits into the American psyche and American culture. Alongside him is Fouad. Fouad's here, guys. He's here. Now, please excuse Dave. He's in negative space. He's in another dimension at the moment. And we are gladly pulling him from that dimension, getting a direct feed, and he's going to enlighten us on some of the things that are in the sports world and in the realm of the sports universe right now that have gotten less attention. How's that sound, Dave?
Ibrahim, I feel like I got to tell the audience that this is all Google. I'm not high. I'm not doing this as an elaborate prank. I'm not some big fan of Through a Scanner Darkly. I'm not playing. This is Google.
This is Google has failed us.
Put all your faith in big corporations. Because you get things like this. You get Ghostface.
You get the straight up Ghostface.
We have Ghostface Zirin.
I mean, am I even moving? Is my mouth moving?
Maybe we...
Yeah, actually, like, you're not now.
Cool. This is cool. It's like I look like a very somber patriarch.
No, you know what you look like? I don't know if
family.
You look like a Jack Kirby sports superhero.
Nice. That I'll take.
Yeah, you have the stern face as the man fighting for justice.
I'll take it.
So
or a man trying to destroy Gotham.
Ooh.
Well...
So let's bring it real quick. Let's bring it from the beginning of where this conversation started, and it's particularly relevant right now because in Brooklyn, New York, young people, a young man was just recently shot by NYPD, and people are right now in the streets fighting, literally fighting with the police for justice. And in that context, you have a stop and frisk. You have a sort of young people being carted off to jail left and right. Within that framework, you have prisons that are buying stadiums. Dave, can you talk about that a little bit? And that one particular story from Florida that really highlights this issue.
No, absolutely. There's a place called Florida Atlantic University. It's in South Florida, and they were looking to sell the naming rights to their stadium for what their football stadium was going to be called. And they got a $6 million deal from an alumnus. They were very excited about it, and they were going to call the stadium Geo Group Stadium. Slight problem, though, and that's that Geo Group Stadium is the second largest private prison corporation in the United States. And I got to just put my cards on the table. I think private prisons are immoral no matter what, because they spend tens of millions of dollars lobbying government for mass incarceration. They lobby government for 3 strikes and you're outlaws, for tougher mandatory minimums, and because the more prisoners they have, the better they do. So that's a problem in and of itself. But then, if private prisons, this is what I wrote in my article, if they're like a disease, then Geo Group is the Ebola virus. They're particularly bad. I mean, a judge in Mississippi, this is Mississippi, mind you, not some paragon of justice, described them as an inhuman cesspool. That's Mississippi. Describe Geo Group as an inhuman cesspool for how they treat their prisoners. And so the students have said, well, wait a minute, we're not going to offer free advertising for the private prison industry. We're going to protest. So the Florida Atlantic, their mascot is the Owls. So the students have started a movement called Stop Owlcatraz. And they've done sit-ins in the president's office. They've done protests on campus. They've leafleted. And this has now become like a national campaign to make Florida Atlantic give up the money, because it's not just about taking the money of this corporation. Geo Group right now is vying to become the warehouser of choice for the state of Florida when immigration reform passes, and it's going to be open season on the 3 million undocumented immigrants in the state of Florida. I mean, the private prison industry is so excited for immigration reform, and Geo Group wants Florida's piece.
Dave, what do you think that message sent for a young athlete who is, let's say, 16 years old in Florida that is, trying to make their way to a scholarship What kind of message do you think that sends to them?
Oh, hideous. I mean, it's long been said in South Florida that the future for particularly young men of color, young African American men, is you're either going to be a pro football player, or you're going to end up in penitentiary. And here you have Florida Atlantic just taking out the middle person and just bringing together penitentiary life with football life and just being done with it. Now, what's so hideous and grotesque about this is that there are a lot of students at Florida Atlantic who are trying to show a different way, that it's not just about sports or prison. I mean, it's got a huge immigrant population at that school, and that's what hurts so many of the students so much. It's like, wait a minute, no, we don't want to be defined by either being prisoners or jocks. Like, we actually want to use our minds and see if we can get out of the ghetto that way. And actually, a lot of the students, they're now coming forward and saying, our parents have had to stay in GEO group prisons before, and we know how terrible they are. And so the idea that we can never leave the nightmare of the GEO brand behind is just too horrible for them to comprehend.
Yeah, it strikes me as such a tragedy and ironic in a terrible way that you're talking about athletes, right? And athletes, a lot of them are minorities, and who gets profiled and put into private prisons more often than anyone else? Minorities, things that Ibrahim was talking about earlier. And you're right, Florida, if we're talking about the immigrant issue, Dave pointed this out, these groups have been heavily lobbying in sort of the immigration reform stuff that's been circulating around. They make a lot of money in terms of housing a lot of illegal immigrants. So they have a lot to gain from the system the reform that we're trying to set up with, that bipartisan consensus. I think it's...
You see why they have the dollar signs in their eyes. I mean, currently the United States has 2 million prisoners. It's the largest, not only prison rate per capita in the world, but the largest total number of prisoners for any country in the world. There are 3 million undocumented immigrants in Florida alone. So think about that. Here's GEO Group, who's already a multi-billion-dollar corporation, saying, whoa, we need to normalize mass incarceration in the state of Florida. And how do you normalize it? You make your name like McDonald's. You make your name like Coca-Cola. You brand it. And that's what they're trying to do with this stadium by.
Do you think that this is something that, and so let's wrap this up, but do you think that this is something that could happen in other parts of the country? Are there, and not just for a sort of and not, for a smaller school, like, but what about a bigger school that might be in a little bit of financial trouble? Is this possible?
Absolutely that could happen, because the definition of a school in financial trouble these days is a school. Every school is in financial trouble. Over 95% of athletic departments lose money in this country, and one of the ones that actually makes money, I learned this today, is the University of Texas. That's one of the very few that makes money. They're putting their own professors on furlough right now and cutting back on faculty hours and cutting back on administrative hours. So even they are prey to the budget busters. So everybody is looking for ways to make more money. Everybody's trying to figure out a way to max out their athletic departments. And I don't think that your typical college president has, I don't think they have the morals of a Las Vegas gambler. I don't think they care. You know, one of my favorite statistics, this Sports Illustrated got this, is that 85% of college presidents think that schools spend too much money on sports, but only 14% think they spend too much money on sports. It's a culture of denial that they live in. And you hear that in the quotes of the Florida Atlantic president, where she's like, oh, I think GEO Group, they're a wonderful community partner. And it's like, do you even know what they do? And then the students told her what some of their record, and she's like, jeepers, I was unaware of this, but guess what? The check's already been deposited.
We're locked in, yeah.
Complete unawareness.
So, okay, so real quick, and for both of you guys, you can think about this. This brings up sort of the pervasive culture, which I think is not just with the each institution as you described, but the whole system, and highlighted by all this, like all these conference shifting and moving around. Yep. Is the NCAA still a relevant body, or does it need to be disbanded?
Oh, both of those questions, the answer is yes. because yes, absolutely, the NCAA needs to go the way of burning witches and the horse and buggy. It's an antiquated, outdated institution. A stake should be put through its heart and should be put to death. But is it still needed? Yes, it's still needed because the system itself is so incredibly unjust that the center will not hold. You've got coaches making millions of dollars a year. You got unpaid athletes trussed out with more advertisements on their body than a typical NASCAR, yet they don't see a cent. So colleges still need an instrument of enforcement so they don't get their hands dirty. They still need that kind of extra legal judicial body that has control over them. They need it so they can discipline their workers, their unpaid workers. So it's both not needed and it's needed at the same time.
Do you think that there's a sort of an alternative that you can think of that would be better, that would hold that center in a more effective way?
Oh, most definitely. The only way the center is going to hold, first and foremost, is if you start capping coaches' pay. So coaches aren't not only the highest paid person on campus, but often the highest paid public employee in the state, which is just sick. And cap the salaries of assistant coaches as well, and use that money to actually pay players. So you have a real economy that takes place, and they're treated like the campus workers that they are. Now, that doesn't mean they can't go to class, but here's a crazy idea. How about the ones who want an education, get an education, and those who just want to play football, guess what? They're over 18. They're old enough to pick up a gun and go overseas. They're old enough to vote. Have them just play football then. I mean, at least until the NFL gets its own head out of its behind and ponies up for its own minor league.
So, Fouad, from your perspective, you some of these young people you might end up in your classrooms.
I've had some. Yeah.
So, do you think that they is there an awareness of the unjust nature of the way it's structured at the moment?
Yeah, I think that that's true. I mean, I've had basketball players who've gone on to some pretty impressive things in classes that I've TA'd for or taught, and it's pretty obvious to see the millions and millions of dollars that these universities are making off these athletes, and they don't see anything from it. I mean, I think there's an alternative system other than necessarily paying the players, but unlikely, which is to take a lot of the revenue you get and actually invest it in the communities that the universities are in. There's got to be something different, though. The way that the incentives are set up right now, it's really perverse, and we need a regulatory body, certainly, but the NCAA is not the organization to do it, obviously, anymore. It's basically just punishing players when you've created these incentives for them to basically not be students, to not be participants in the community, and to basically be workers who don't actually see the money that they're bringing in for a university. And it's just really, really disturbing and alarming, and it creates a level of hero worship or something along those lines for the coaches then, right, who become the most powerful people in the state. And we saw this with Joe Paterno in Penn State, and I think that's the real story behind that story is just, how do we even get to the point where something like that could happen? Oh, it's because we've created a structure of power within universities and schools that make it institutionally they're kingpins. And
so he's a university pharaoh. When I want to shift again now. Again, you guys have both at different times talked about, and this is interesting, Dave. You mentioned if the NFL had a farm system. Well, the baseball does have a farm system, and I know that you love baseball. I love baseball. Fouad, I think you love baseball.
I love baseball.
Who's your squad, by the way, Fouad?
I'm an Oakland A's fan, man.
So that's a good team. We like them. So given what was the impact of Hugo Chavez's passing on the farm system as we know it today, Dave?
I mean, that's a terrific question, and I will count this as the most undercovered story in the sports world in the last 2 weeks. Venezuela is the second largest provider of players to Major League Baseball for people born outside the United States, only slightly behind the Dominican Republic. And one could easily make the mistake that Venezuela is the pipeline of the most important foreign-born players in Major League Baseball. I mean, think about Miguel Cabrera, the Triple Crown winner. Think about Pablo Sandoval, the World Series MVP. Think about the king, Felix Hernandez, all born in Venezuela. And yet Major League Baseball, since Hugo Chavez was elected president, has been leaving Venezuela in droves. There were as many as 22 baseball academies set up in Venezuela to scout and train talent, 22 out of the 30 teams. It's down to 5 right now. And why did they leave? They left because Hugo Chavez said he was going to tax them. He said he was going to require by law that they hire people from the local communities. I mean, he wanted to do, frankly, it's very interesting, exactly what Fouad just said in terms of what he wanted the college football programs to do. Like Hugo Chavez said, if you're going to be here and strip mine our youth and try to get them to play your sport, you're going to invest in the communities as well. And Major League Baseball, they engaged in what's known as capital flight. They just left in droves. Now, you might ask the question, well, wait a minute. How do you then get Felix Hernandez, Miguel Cabrera, Pablo Sandoval if they've been leaving in the last 10 years? And the answer to that is Major League Baseball never stopped scouting in Venezuela. What they did instead was they just signed kids and shipped them off to the Dominican Republic, which speaks to the very mercenary nature of how Major League Baseball scouts Latin American and Caribbean talent.
So who's still there? Who's left?
Oh my God, I don't know which teams are left. It's only 5 are left right now. That's what I know for sure.
I'm sure the Mets are probably there because they probably need the help.
I would be very, once again, I don't know, but I would be very surprised if the Mets were there as a Mets fan because they lost so much of their money with Bernie Madoff.
Yep.
They don't got money for anything. I mean, Mike, I'd be surprised if they had an academy or a scout in Spanish Harlem, let alone Venezuela. And they probably would make the scout pay for his own subway fare to get from Flushing to the Upper East Side. I mean, team's got no money. Fred Wilpon knocks on my door, asks me for $5.
Dave, I have a question. So, what are the conditions in these academies like? And could you tell us a little about Yuri Guillen, for instance? That was a big story that came out right around the same time. Thunder Jones had a big profile on it.
Yeah, they did, and I've been writing about the academies for a decade at least. They're shameful. I mean, in terms of having medical personnel on staff, in terms of stuffing kids in rooms, in terms of multiple children, and that's what they are, is children, sharing bathrooms. I mean, they sign them as young as 15 years old. They get signed for a couple of $1,000s. I mean, the conditions really are terrible, and 97% of them get discarded. Like they're not worth a damn when it's all said and done. And they find themselves, at that point, adults trying to find work with no appreciable skills.
Wow.
97%. And that's what's so cruel about the game of baseball is that to find that one Miguel Cabrera, you need to get 20 other people on the field. It's like you can't see it just by seeing somebody in a batting cage. You actually have to see them play. And yet, for 19 of those 20 people, they're not going to have a future in baseball. They're just there as supporting players in the drama of the one star who gets through. That's what's so cutthroat about it, and that's what's so sad about it. And that's why Hugo Chavez pushed forward the idea, like, look, if you're just going to be using 19 of these 20 kids, then I want to see you actually have some sort of education here, provide jobs, and do something so there's something left for them when you eventually break their hearts.
So baseball is a metaphor for colonialism and capitalism, and it's also the most data immersed, the workplace that we have the most data about. It's also sort of this metaphor. Can you speak to that a little bit, and how, and just again about some of these other sports and how they relate to the capitalist and colonialist experience?
Yeah, I mean, first I would say it's not a metaphor for colonialism and capitalism. It is colonialism and capitalism, and it always has been. There's a great book called The Empire Strikes Out by Robert Elias, and another book called Raceball by Rob Ruck, and it goes through the way that colonialism in countries like the Dominican Republic and like Venezuela and like Puerto Rico and like Cuba, that baseball was a key part of how that happened. Baseball was an active part of the policy of once you had a military conquest, what was the stamp that America was going to put on? I mean, Albert Spalding, who was one of the founders of Major League Baseball in the 19th century, he said baseball has always followed the flag. And so it's always been a component of how the relationship between the Caribbean and the United States has been negotiated.
So to be positive as we wrap this up, I just want to
sorry, man. I don't mean to be a downer.
No.
People are just laughing so hard looking at my face, so that's okay.
I wanted to end on specifically despite all of that, because it's true. I mean, we look at it and we're very critical consumers of media, critical consumers of the sports that we are obsessed with. In a sense, we're not blind to the reality behind it. And despite all that, sports is filled with drama. There's incredible moments, and right now we're in the midst of the most incredible, arguably one of the most incredible tournaments. I would say March Madness and the World Cup are the two most incredible tournaments in terms of the shock value. Could you just speak to a little bit of what do you expect with this tournament with the NCAAs? And both of you guys can speak to it if you have any. And so if Fouad, I don't know if you even care about basketball.
I love basketball.
Damn, Fouad, every sport, Ibrahim's like, Fouad, you probably hate this.
I know. PhD students like these things sometimes.
I thought you just like football. You look like a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I think that this tournament this year, and I say this as someone who cannot stand the NCAA, cannot stand the institution. I get why people love March Madness. I think this year's tournament is going to be the most exciting in years.
Yeah.
Because, first of all, there are no powerhouse teams, but there are a lot of excellent teams. And that's the key thing to say. Like, a lot of people say, oh, there are not a lot of powerhouse teams, as if to say the quality of basketball isn't good, but that's not true. I mean, I think that there's just a layer of really, really exciting good teams. And I'm excited to see what happens. I've got my pick. I got my bracket filled out. And I feel really good about who I think is going to go all the way.
So you didn't do like a vanity bracket?
I did. I filled out my bracket. That's just so I can show all the fools that say, oh, man, you don't know anything about sport. I'm like, man, who picked it? I picked it. Scoreboard. I know my trade.
I end up every year picking Syracuse to win, and it doesn't really work out well.
Yeah, that's not good.
It's not a good play.
You know who I like? I like the Michigan Wolverines to go all the way.
I like what you're saying, Dave.
I'll tell you why.
Universities have top 4 seeds, Georgetown and Michigan, so
oh yeah,
I'll be pulling for both of them. And one thing I do like about the even field, Dave's right, it's a lot more evenly dispersed in terms of the teams. I think in terms of money and college sports, I think this is a model that could work if we actually have a regulatory body. Sorry, I want to bring in politics for a quick second before we get into it. I am the political scientist here. If we have a more even field, a real good regulatory body that says, we're actually going to let students be students, or, differentiate between letting you go to class versus getting paid. If we even the field and we create a nice regulatory body, we actually would have, great competition, I think, as opposed to mandating these kids are in a gym like 24/7 all year long training. Like, if everyone brings the bar down a little bit, they get an opportunity to be students and participants in their communities and college life. And the game doesn't lose a lot, but it actually gets a lot more exciting. And I think basketball is a little bit better than football on this. I think football is where there's a real need for regulation. And I think basketball, I do enjoy the parity a little bit more, just because it's a little bit tougher in terms of, it's a little bit less notorious, I think.
Do you think that from the tournament perspective, do you think that it would be, what could they do to make it just this moment? What could the sort of webbed into the tournament, the regional format, the way that they're all over the country, how could they sort of be better integrated with the communities that they're going to? Like, is this an opportunity right now? Is this an opportunity for all these young people to get engaged, or do you want them locked in right now, just trying to win that trophy?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think if the overall level of play goes down a little bit, but they're doing other things, we're not really going to notice very much. These are college kids. We don't need professional level playing, you know? They get drafted and they get paid millions of dollars. They train all the time. That's one thing. But these are college kids. It's interesting. They're playing in all these different regions. And I think it's fascinating, especially in economic hard times that we're having, right? I mean, there's a lot of places in this country that have been hit in very bad ways, and it's an opportunity for kids to maybe even participate in some sort of community events of some sort, see what folks are, living like in different conditions across the country, participate, broaden their horizons a little bit, and maybe have one less practice.
So
It's
that,
not the worst thing in the world, I think, and
that
we
would,
would notice.
that would be the opposite of all the fanfare that goes towards creating the hoopla of the Super Bowl or the build up for the national championship in football. It would be a really interesting sort of austerity in the United States moment if you had young athletes going out and getting involved in community service. Dave, do you think that would be a nice intervention?
No, I think it would be very helpful. I think anytime you can break athletes out of the bubble, positive things result.
I love it. So I think we're good. I appreciate Dave Zirin, even though Google has failed us, but we got your voice, we got your ideas, we got your thoughts. This is the No Spoon blog. We had Fouad, the sort of undercover secret agent disguised as a PhD student. My name is Ibrahim Abdul-Matin, and we appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dave.
My privilege, fellas.
All right, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good night.